Welcome to Program Progeny. Today we're going to be doing chapter 13, A Man for All Seasons, and we're going to be talking about when H joined the band.
Yes. So it was good fun last week chatting with H, wasn't it?
Yeah, my connection was awful. I think people thought that I was struggling to get a word in, but I wasn't really. I was just delayed, so I was trying not to speak as much because I knew I was delayed, if you
Yeah,
know
you
what I
had some
mean.
nice comments from people saying, poor
I
Tallulah, she
I know
couldn't get a
I
word in.
I saw them and I did I did have things to say, but I just thought because my connection was so poor, I'll just not. But yeah, no, it was a great chat. Should do it again.
Yeah, well, he's up for it. So, well, since last week, I mean, because we're recording this like a week ahead now, I put out a track yesterday. So for people that are just watching this on YouTube, they probably don't know we've got a Patreon page, and for our Patreon subscribers, I've been releasing music at various, well, probably on average about once a month. So there's about 5 or 6 tracks that I've done, and the latest one I did yesterday was kind of inspired by this story, which coincidentally, Tallulah, you read about this as well.
Yeah, so for the first time, an AI song has topped the charts, the music charts in America. It's a country song, which doesn't really surprise me that much, that it would be a
I
country
was going
song
to
that would do
say,
well. And it's called Walk My Walk by a band called Breaking Rust, which I feel like are people sure it's AI? I think people do know it's
yeah,
AI.
it certainly is.
Yeah,
It said I
yeah,
listened to it. It definitely is. The thing is, well, one, it's topped the country charts, not the overall chart. So, and
but it's the first
I'm
AI song to do really well in the charts, I think.
yeah, it's got like 2 million listeners or something. So it's crazy. I'm going to say something bad about country music now, which is that it's very formulaic. The lyrics, subject matter is always the same sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit for AI to imitate. It's a bit like
Which is why I said I
if you,
wasn't surprised that it would be a country
yeah,
song do well.
it is pretty banal, really, which like most AI music is. I mean, if you ask it to create a rock song, it'll sound like something between Bon Jovi and Imagine Dragons or something like that.
Hmm.
So it's kind of very middle of the road. Anyway, I did this track yesterday, or I published this track yesterday, which was kind of like about AI. I wrote the music, recorded the music, and the lyrics were. I got it to be sung by AI. So the only part of it that's AI is the singing, because I wanted it to be like a robotic Kraftwerk style voice. So it kind of suited the fact that it's about AI, that AI would sing it. And the reactions I've had have been quite mixed. What did you think of it, Tallulah? Okay, nothing. Well, if you didn't
It
like it,
wasn't
that's
to my
fine.
taste. It wasn't to my taste. I mean, you just heard me listen to it and I stopped halfway through and said, I think I've heard enough.
I thought
I
you were trying
don't
to be.
like that robot. I don't like first, okay, on the AI side, I get why you used AI for that, but I don't like that whole like robotic lyric thing.
Yeah,
To be honest, I prefer your music when it's feels like it's just you playing the keyboards rather than loads of techno sounds. But I think that's because I just prefer that kind of music. But
yeah.
I
I
did
mean,
like some of the tune and stuff.
it was an
I can't say
experiment.
I'd listen to it again.
I was quite surprised how I was quite surprised how polarizing it was, because some people were like, AI, I
But
don't
go and
like it.
subscribe so you can listen to it.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to listen to it, and some of the other things I've done, it's not all AI.
It's not
Well,
all
certainly,
crap.
no. I thought the music
No,
I'm
I'm
actually very
joking.
happy with.
It
I
wasn't crap.
actually am.
I liked the music. I'm just saying that that genre wasn't isn't my favorite.
Yeah, fair enough.
What were the
So yeah, you.
comments? I saw a couple of them.
Well, some people really liked it. Some people were really anti it because of the AI content, which is fair enough.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's if you want to hear it, you have to subscribe to our Patreon. But as I said, there's 5 or 6 other things up there, and new things happening on a monthly basis. I'm putting new tracks up there. They're quite varied. There's a just a solo piano thing, which is a song that I wrote for Tallulah, for example.
Yeah, I love that song. It's lovely.
Yeah.
But
So
that's more my
any
style of music. I like that more. I don't know whether authentic's the word, but that's how I would describe it.
yeah, but it was meant to be intentionally electronic-y music sounding, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you've
No, no,
ever
no, I
listened
know.
to Kraftwerk. There's a little bit of a Vangelis influence there as well, which people liked, which I totally agree. It has that as well. Anyway,
Just on
enough
that
about.
though, the reason I heard about that Walk by Walk song is because I was listening to the radio this morning, and the two journalists that were talking about it said that they, you know, they got into a conversation about whether they cared about AI music, and they kind of said, well, I care about the copyright if it's, stealing other musicians' um, inventions and ideas, but I don't think I care necessarily about whether music's written by AI. And I think I disagree with that.
I think I do too. I think it's important that it's made music's made by humans, really.
Mm.
And just to be clear, it's not a path that I intend to go down. There's one thing getting AI to sing a tune and words that you've written. It's another thing to say,
It's a
make
slippery
me a
slope, though.
song. It's a slippery slope. Maybe it is.
I don't know if you use those shortcuts, and then it definitely, if you're really struggling, you go tempted to ask
Yeah,
AI.
but it doesn't. Well, in my experience, what AI produces without input from a human is just very bland,
Mm.
very ordinary, nothing surprising or exciting. It just doesn't. It just sounds totally unoriginal. That's the only way I can describe it. You don't want to listen to it more than once. That's why I'm really surprised that this country song has done so well. But then maybe that says more about country music and their fans rather than about AI. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, all the people who I know who don't really care about music love country music. Leave it there. Do you know
Have
what
we
I
said
mean?
enough? Have we dissed
Have
country
we
music
slagged off
enough yet?
country music lovers
Yeah.
enough?
So anyway, let's get on with the chapter.
This chapter was much more uplifting, I thought.
Well, we've moved on from all the skullduggery of the previous couple of years, and it was a much lighter time. As we were saying with H last week, we just had a lot of fun. We made an album in a matter of months, wrote and recorded it. It was all went really smoothly. We had a fantastic tour. The Season's End tour went on for about a year. We did well over 100 gigs. So it was really, really great.
Hmm. I was going to ask you, when Fish left, was your record deal in jeopardy?
I think, well, obviously when he offered to resign, I think the first thing that John Arneson did was contact the record company and ask them about whether they
Yeah.
would take up the option. And they would be crazy not to. They, from a million selling band and the singer, they separate. We were all individually contracted to the record label. So by him leaving the band, it didn't get us out of our deals. So we were all still contracted. So it was up to the record company to decide whether they wanted to continue the relationship. And in the case of both Fish and us, EMI decided that they did. So, which kind of makes
Both
sense.
of
They would
you.
say, yeah, they wanted to continue, and it makes sense because they would say, yeah, let's put a record out and see how it does without. Well, it's like they get two artists for the price of one almost.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, and we didn't really talk about this with H, but there was a unspoken competition going on about who could release the first album.
Who could release their album first? Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it was. I think we both us and Fish believed that whoever got their album out first would do better. Because the interest would be there more so.
Yeah, which
I
makes
think
sense.
I think the actual truth was a little bit more nuanced than that. It just kind of depended on the people in the record company, because we found out afterwards that the German label, which I've mentioned in the book, the head of the German label was like, oh, well, you know, when we put our album out and it did really well, their response was like, well, if Marillion can do that without Fish, just think what Fish would do without Marillion, you know.
Yeah.
And they really pushed his album in Germany, and he actually outsold us in Germany, but everywhere else we outsold him. So shows what power the record label has if they're willing to get behind something. I thought that was quite interesting. And then subsequent albums, it was kind of, you know, we were definitely outselling Fish every album. It was just that first one where I suppose most of the fans would have bought both just to check it out, you
Yeah.
know.
When you were kind of getting quite good headway on Season's End, Fish served you a.
A writ. We were in the studio recording, and this was in kind of April, May, June time, I think.
Yeah.
And so we'd started with Steve H in the January, and by that time we'd already finished writing and we were in the studio. Fish, meanwhile, whilst he had kind of had a head start with his writing with Mickey Simmons, because he knew who he wanted to work with as soon as he left the band, he quickly fell behind because he didn't have a whole band, and I think it takes time to find the right people and for them to be available to record. So his schedule actually slipped behind ours, and I think to try and slow us down, he decided to serve a writ on us. So whilst we were recording, this lawyer turned up with a couple of policemen in tow to protect him in case we got violent. You know, we were all just sat around the swimming pool, and he took this
Yeah.
lawyer. This lawyer marches up with these two policemen, looking all, you know, serious, and said he's come to serve this writ, which was basically to stop us from using our own equipment on the basis that Fish owned 1/5 of the equipment,
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
we hadn't we hadn't decided how much to pay him for his share. So he said, "Okay, I want, you know, to slap an injunction on us to stop us using the equipment that he partly owned." And we were
Quite
like, "Oh,
clever.
let's do." Quite clever, but it didn't really do much good because we just said, "Okay, we'll stop using the equipment. Let H do some vocals," because we were quite far down the line with the recording, so H could do some singing for a few days, while our lawyers got on the case and basically sorted it out and agreed what we would pay Fish and paid him and moved on. But yeah, we were like, let's do some photographs. So we were standing on the pool asking if the policeman would take a picture with us, and you know,
What, and did
so
you
we
send
didn't
them to
take.
Fish?
No, no, it was just for a bit of fun. We didn't take it that seriously. It was kind of just a little bit inconvenient, really. So
And then it did progress into a lawsuit, didn't it? Eventually.
yeah, I think in the early days of him leaving, we were fairly amicable. We had that period where we were working on the Thieving Magpie, the live album, and Fish was happy to go in the studio, even though we weren't there. You know, there was a kind of a willingness to make a joint statement about him leaving. But then it quickly deteriorated when he started to say, okay, because you know part of the disagreement we had, or part of what was in his letter, was about the money and the fact that he wanted control, but he also wanted 50% of all the songwriting royalties. So and we didn't think that was fair. So once he'd left, he then said, okay, I'm going to take you to court on the basis that although I was only earning 35%, that was because I was in the band and I didn't really agree to that. And now I want it to have 50% and I want it backdated to the beginning of the band. Now, I think it would have been very hard for him to win a backdated settlement, but we thought that we would win anyway, because you know it's only fair that the agreement that we had while he was in the band should still stand, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, he kind of outmaneuvered us. He had a really good lawyer who had faced off against our lawyer in a previous court case between the members of Pink Floyd, and in that case,
Did you not know
Roger
that?
Ward. No, it kind of had a bearing on it because Roger Waters was represented by our solicitor, and the rest of Pink Floyd were represented by his solicitor, and Pink Floyd won. And so our solicitor was basically gunning for a fight. He wanted to have a rematch, basically, and because he had the band this time, and the singer was in the other camp, you know.
So why did he lose?
I don't know the details of the Pink Floyd case, but it was again, it was about, it was mainly about the who owned the name, I think,
No, but
and
why did you lose this time?
what in our
Because you lost.
case,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, we didn't technically lose because we
you
didn't end up going to
settled.
court. We settled exactly, but he was like, "Yeah, you're going to win, you're going to win," and so of course we were like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we spent all this money, and then we got some advice from a Queen's Counsel barrister,
Yeah.
and his advice was, "You should take a settlement because you'll lose because the precedent is that songwriting royalties are split 50-50, 50% to the lyrics and 50% to the music. So even though there was four of us and one of him, they would still argue that he could get 50%. So anyway, on that basis, we settled. We reached an agreement to pay him his 50%, but not to be backdated. So that was where the compromise was.
Was your lawyer pissed off?
We were pissed off with him after having spent all that money, only to get the you know the expensive
The
advice
worst
that
outcome.
yeah, we could have agreed that at the beginning, you know,
Yeah.
without we spent at that time it was probably more than £50,000 on legal advice. I know Fish spent well over £100,000 on legal advice because his lawyer was much more expensive than ours.
Wow.
Yeah, and at that time, obviously, that was a lot of money.
Mm.
Anyway, once we'd agreed all that, once we'd got it out of the way, we kind of moved on, really.
You were personally in quite a lot of debt, weren't you?
Was I? Ah, thanks for reminding me about that.
It says here 40k overdraft, and you were spending beyond your means. That's
Yeah,
quite.
so Susie and I bought this really big house in Wendover. It wasn't a hugely expensive house because it needed some work doing to it. It was kind of a bit run down, you know, and but it was a really nice house, and we spent a couple of years living there, doing it up. Spent a lot of money on, you know, new bathrooms and all that sort of stuff. So kind of got ourselves in quite a bit of debt, and without really thinking about what we would do to pay it back in the future, except that the band was doing really well. So you think, okay, money's just going to keep coming in. But of course, once Fish left,
Mm.
you know, we were about to sign £1 million publishing deal. So I kind of wasn't really worried. But running up a 40 grand overdraft is probably the worst way of borrowing money. You know, the interest that you pay on that is horrible.
No.
And and we sold the house around about the same time that Fish left. It was probably a few months before he left. So the timing actually was really, really lucky because there was a big price correction in the housing market as well. It had literally just started as we were selling the house. You know, I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, and never had any money in my life before. So it was like, yeah, you know.
Yeah. So, talking about irresponsibility, there is something in this chapter that is a bit awkward for me to bring up.
Is it?
You had an affair.
I met somebody else and blew up my family, and God knows where my head was at. Yeah, that was in 1990, about a year after Steve joined the band. I rented this flat in London. I enjoyed living there. It was nice living in London. Well, you know what it's like. You live there now.
It's great.
And then we were working on Holidays in Eden, which was a completely different experience to working on Season's
Yeah,
End. But we'll get to that. We touched on that with H, didn't we? But we
we
can.
did. The first recording, you know, with Nick. Was it at Hook End that you were in?
Yeah, Hook and Manor
Yeah,
with Nick
was
Davis. Yeah,
amazing and really easy. And then the second one you said was really hard, and you kind of your writing styles clashed.
the the writing part was really hard. The recording part wasn't hard, but the writing was very slow going, even by our
Mm.
standard. Well, if you compare it to today, it was actually pretty quick. But compared to everything we'd written previously, we were suddenly now working at a snail's pace, which only got worse as the albums went on. To be honest, Brave took
Yeah.
even longer. While I was living in Putney, we started work on the next album, and we went to Stanbridge. That's right, Stanbridge Studios, in which was actually completely different to the Mushroom Farm, or the Music Farm as they called it. It was still near Brighton. For some reason we liked to be near Brighton.
Mm.
Like it was a big farmhouse, put it like that. It wasn't that grand, but you know what I mean, the sort of thing. And
Right.
it had a big barn and a few built, like a cottage in the grounds, and the big barn was where we set up and rehearsed. But it was kind of a bit run down. The house was pleasant enough, but the barn itself was a bit damp, and it was just like big old carpets everywhere, just to try and dampen the sound down a bit. But it was fine. But we were there for months. I mean, we arrived in the summer, and we were still there coming up to Christmas. And yeah, it was hard. It was hard going because we didn't have a way of working together with H. And I just think we'd kind of run out of ideas as well. We were struggling to come up with new music. That was the other thing.
Wasn't the
So
record company putting pressure on you to write hits as well?
yeah, I think yeah, and we were trying our best to oblige as well, because it would have been good to have another hit like Kaylee. And we wrote that song "No One Can," given the right chances, and I think there's a lot of luck involved with hits. Could have been a big hit. And "Cover My Eyes" was fairly successful in a few countries. I think it got to like number 6 in the Netherlands. But on the whole, but we can talk about that next time, because I think that is in the next chapter.
Right.
What happened with the album? But yeah, the writing period was slow going, and we kind of clashed a little bit for the first time. The honeymoon was
How
over, and
so?
now, well, just because H was getting frustrated, because what would happen is we would start working on an idea. Let's say we have an idea. Somebody plays something, and you go, "Oh, that's really good." Like the chorus of "No One Can," I had the chords and like a sampled guitar, and Steve was doing his picking guitar thing. I had like a sampled harmonics going ding dong dong ding ding dong dong, and the basic chords. It was nice, and we thought, okay, that's the
Mm.
chorus. H would be like, okay, we need to write a verse, and we wrote the verse the way he wanted to write it, which was literally to go, okay, this chord, now this chord, I'm going to sing this melody. And, he literally forced it out of nothing, bit by bit,
Hmm.
by trying stuff and going like, how about this? No, how about that? What about doing this chord? And then we can have this change. Rather than the way we normally write, which is somebody just spontaneously plays something and you go, oh, that's interesting. Let's see what we can do with that. The problem with the
Do you
spontaneous,
bank it for later, or will you go, let's see what we can do with that, and then you'll write something? Or do you kind of bank it
it
for later?
in those days, H always wanted to just work on it there and then while we were excited about it and finish the song. We
Yeah.
were of the opinion that actually, no, you shouldn't just try and finish a song by willing it into existence. If you've got one good bit, you have to wait for another good bit to come along that you
Yeah,
can then,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And that's kind of requires on somebody. It requires that somebody has some inspiration, and then it has to kind of go with the other bit, and it probably won't, because
yeah. Mm.
they're being created in isolation from each other rather than being a development from each other.
Yeah.
So it's a much slower way of working, and I think both ways of working have their place, and that's the truth.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
back
yeah. You
then,
need a mixture of both.
and that's what we did. But it was a bit like knocking nails into a piece of wood, because H would be constantly pushing for us to work that way, his way, which is like just get on with it and do it now. And the rest of us were like, no, no, we need to live with this a little while and see if we get any more inspiration for what we could do next, you know. So and it
Yeah.
kind of led to a bit of a clash of
I can see
wheel,
both
not
sides.
wheels. Yeah, and I think both sides are valid. That's the truth, you know. Some people are really good at just, you know, I'm sure somebody like John Lennon or Paul McCartney, they'll have an idea and they'll finish it with just by being inspired, and it all comes together really
Yeah.
quickly. And that, I was going to say, occasionally that happens with us, where you know you'll start off with something that you know is good, and before you know it, you've got the best part of a song written. But it doesn't always work like that.
I do think there's something in persisting though. Like a lot of musicians, you hear like some of their best songs, they wrote it in an afternoon. You know, when you
Yeah,
hear that. But
yeah.
and
Elton
like I
John.
don't think there's necessarily anything. I don't necessarily think that spending loads of time on a song does a good song make, if you know what I mean.
I do, and I think Elton John's a great example of that, because he always used to say, you know, if I start working on a song, if I haven't written it in 30 minutes, then it's no good. So he literally
Mm,
will just, he'll get inspired and he'll write the song and it's done.
yeah.
Of course, if you listen to his albums, this is my opinion, he's got some great songs, but he's also got some really average songs. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's one of those things. Um,
you know, having said that, I'd be happy to have his great songs and the average songs, if that was, you know, if that was the deal, you know.
yeah, but you can get like overwhelmed. I don't know. It's easy to get overwhelmed, and sometimes you just have to. Yeah, I don't know. You can always think this could be better. This could be different because it's
Yeah,
creative, isn't it?
and just to talk about how it feels now for us, just to say that when you're starting out and you're in the early days of a band, you're kind of, I wouldn't say you're easily pleased, but you kind of are, because you know everything's new, it's very fresh, and you know, ideas that you get excited about when you're young aren't necessarily the same things you would get excited about when you're old. And
Mm.
so it gets harder as you go on, and people, creativity for most people tends to disappear or decrease over time. So you don't find many people in our age bracket being very creative. There are exceptions, but generally, most people's creative period in their lives is in their young adulthood, or you know. So it's more of a challenge. It takes longer. It takes it takes more to excite you. You know, the things that excite you come along much less frequently. So we do a lot of jamming, and we try and get music that excites us, but it takes we have to do a lot more to get enough
Yeah,
material together. You know.
I hadn't thought about that. Also, you all have lives now, and you kind of don't spend as much time together, so it must be hard to, I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't think we could work like that, where we would literally go into a residential studio and spend you know, 2 or 3 months where we're literally every day. That's all we're doing. I think we would
Yeah,
split
and we
up very
speak about
quickly.
that a lot, how that's where the creativity comes. And so, yeah. So, how long does it take you to write an album now compared to before?
It's hard to say, because we don't spend 8 hours a day working on it. It just wouldn't work. We'd drive each other crazy. So, you
Mm.
know, we spend a few hours a day at the creative, trying to come up with the ideas stage, and then, but then once we've got enough ideas and we go, okay, we're at the stage now where we're literally working on, you know, we've got these ideas, we've narrowed down to maybe 15 or 20 things that we're now developing, we're now working on, we're trying to move them forward into finished songs. And at some point we'll drop some of them and say, okay, they're not as good as we thought they were, and then we'll narrow it down to an album's, you know, a whole album's worth.
Mm.
But if you took it in terms of, like, for example, the last album, because that was finished, it looked like it took us a number of years, but really the amount of time we spent actually arranging the ideas and finishing it was less than 6 months, which I know is still quite
But
a
the
long time.
ideas were from years.
Some of them were old, some of them happened as we were doing the arranging. But at the end of it all, we felt like we had a really strong collection of songs.
Mm.
And the response from people has been that it was a really good album. So it's worth it to take the
Yeah.
time and know that we're not going to be as, we wouldn't write a song like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like a song like Chelsea Mondays, for example, off our first album. I think it's a good song, but it's four chords that just go round and round and round. And then we change the key and it's the same four chords in a different key. Lyrically, it's an interesting song. It's a very simple song, and
Mm.
it's quite long as well. Not much happens in it. There's a really nice guitar solo, and I'm not saying it's a bad song, but the the initial idea for that song would probably not get past the quality control of the band now. It just wouldn't be
No,
interesting enough for us.
no.
Whereas then we were excited enough by it that we wanted to move it forward into a song. And we probably wrote the
Yeah.
whole thing in a few hours. That's just
Yeah.
how it was then. Okay, well, should we leave it there? I think we've covered enough of that chapter. But before we go, there's a few new members I'll just give a quick shout out to. Thank you, everybody who's recently signed up to Patreon. We've got Catherine Royk, Samuel Edvardson, Tim Stone, Mike Gusway. Hi, Mike. I know Mike. And we've got Nicola Walters and Diana Andrea and Gavin. Just Gavin. Hi, Gavin. Thank you. Thank you all. And we'll
Thank you.
see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye, Tallulah.
Bye.